Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into the world of 300? Released on March 9, 2006, this film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're uncovering every thrilling detail. If you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us grow. And for more incredible movie explorations and hidden gems, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's unravel the magic behind this cinematic masterpiece. 300 isn't just a war epic. It's a visceral, stylized retelling of the legendary Battle of Thermopylae, where King Leonidas of Sparta, played with brutal charisma by Gerard Butler, leads 300 warriors into a suicidal stand against the overwhelming Persian army of King Xerxes. Inspired by Frank Miller's graphic novel and directed by Zack Snyder, this film doesn't aim for historical precision. It aims for mythic grandeur. From its very first frame, Snyder plunges us into a world soaked in shadows, blood, and glory. The sepia-toned visuals, enhanced by digital color grading, give every scene a painted quality, as if the panels of Miller's comic book have been torn from the page and animated with life and fury. Leonidas isn't just a man, he's a symbol. Raised from childhood in the harsh Spartan tradition, his every scar tells a story of survival and sacrifice. The film opens with a gritty montage of Spartan youth training, establishing a brutal world where weakness is weeded out and strength is worshipped. This foundation is crucial. It frames the Spartans not merely as soldiers, but as legends forged in fire. So when a Persian messenger arrives demanding submission, and Leonidas kicks him into the abyss with that now iconic roar, "This is Sparta!" It feels earned. It's not bravado. It's defiance laced with destiny. What follows is not just a series of battles but a ballet of violence. Every fight is choreographed with poetic brutality, enhanced by Snyder's signature use of slow motion and speed ramping. Swords clash, shields shatter, and blood arcs through the air like crimson rain. Yet within the chaos, there's discipline. The phalanx formation, the unyielding unity of the 300, contrasts beautifully with the sprawling, disorganized Persian horde. And despite the odds, these warriors carve a path through wave after wave of enemies. Immortals, giant beasts, monstrous executioners, all rendered with surreal, nightmarish elegance. But 300 isn't just about spectacle. At its core, it's a tale of honor, defiance, and sacrifice. Queen Gorgo, portrayed with steely grace by Lena Headey, anchors the story back in Sparta. Her political struggle to support her husband's war mirrors the battlefield's tension, giving the film an emotional and thematic balance. Her presence reminds us that the fight isn't just for survival. It's for an idea, for freedom, for legacy. And then there's Xerxes. Played by Rodrigo Santoro, he's an imposing figure, towering, gilded, and godlike. His calm demeanor and soft voice contrast with his army's savagery, making him all the more unsettling. Xerxes offers Leonidas peace, power, and immortality. But Leonidas, ever defiant, chooses death over submission. That quiet moment, where he refuses to kneel, speaks louder than any battlefield cry. Every visual in 300 is intentional. The use of CGI not only brings the fantastical elements to life, but also reinforces the mythic tone. This isn't a documentary. It's a legend retold around a campfire, exaggerated and glorious. The narration by Dilios, one of the Spartan soldiers, reinforces this storytelling frame. He's not recounting history. He's forging memory into myth, turning men into gods through words. Even the film score, composed by Tyler Bates, adds to the grandeur. The pulsing drums, haunting chants, and soaring strings create a sonic landscape that matches the visual intensity. It's music that drives the momentum forward, that elevates each death into a moment of tragic beauty. By the end, when the last of the 300 fall beneath a rain of arrows, there's no sense of defeat. Instead, there's triumph in sacrifice. The final scene, set a year later, sees thousands of Greeks united in battle, inspired by the 300 stand. The legend lives on, not in stone or scrolls, but in spirit. And that's the brilliance of 300. It doesn't ask if the story is true. It asks what the story means. Zack Snyder didn't just adapt a graphic novel. He captured the power of myth, the fire of resistance, and the echo of a war cry that refuses to fade. 300 isn't just a film. It's a visual poem about honor, strength, and the eternal roar of freedom against tyranny. On March 9, 2006, a movie stormed into cinemas that felt less like a historical film and more like a battle cry come to life. 300, directed by Zack Snyder, wasn't just another war epic. It was bold, stylized, violent, and unforgettable. It didn't try to be realistic. It didn't need to. Instead, it pulled viewers into a world of myth and honor, where warriors bled with pride and died with purpose. From the very first scene, it was clear this movie was something different. Audiences hadn't seen anything like it before. It was gritty, beautiful, and intense, all at the same time. The visuals looked more like a moving painting than a traditional movie. The story didn't just show a war. It made you feel like you were part of it. What makes 300 so extraordinary is how it grabs your attention and never lets go. Every frame looks like it was carefully crafted, like a piece of art. Inspired by Frank Miller's graphic novel, the film used a digital backlit technique, which meant most of the backgrounds were added in later with special effects. This gave the movie its dreamlike, sometimes nightmarish quality. The colors were muted, the shadows deep, and the lighting dramatic. The style wasn't about showing the world as it is, it was about showing how legends are remembered. And 300 is exactly that, a legend retold for a modern audience. It took a real historical event, the Battle of Thermopylae, and transformed it into a larger-than-life story that felt timeless and epic. But this movie didn't just rely on visuals. At its heart was a powerful story of courage and sacrifice. The plot centers around King Leonidas of Sparta, played by Gerard Butler, who commands a small army of 300 Spartan warriors against the vast invading Persian forces, led by the self-proclaimed god King Xerxes. Right away, Leonidas is established as a leader who values freedom above all else. When a Persian messenger demands Sparta's surrender, Leonidas responds not with words, but with action, kicking him into a pit with the now famous shout, "This is Sparta!" That one moment captured the spirit of the film, bold, fierce, and unforgettable. The movie doesn't waste time. After that explosive beginning, the story quickly moves into the main conflict. Leonidas, knowing full well that the Spartan council won't support a full war, takes 300 of his best soldiers and marches toward the narrow mountain pass at Thermopylae. There, they plan to make their stand. The stakes are clear. They will either stop the Persian advance or die trying. What follows is a series of battles that are both brutal and strangely beautiful. The Spartans, trained from childhood to be the ultimate warriors, fight with perfect coordination and near unbreakable discipline. Every movement, every strike, feels like part of a deadly dance. As the story unfolds, the challenges grow. The Persians don't just attack with regular soldiers. They send wave after wave of monstrous warriors, beasts, and even dark magic. But the Spartans hold the line, again and again, using strategy, strength, and unshakable courage. It's not just about blood and swords, though. There are moments of quiet intensity, too. Between the battles, we see glimpses of Leonidas's relationship with his queen, Gorgo, who stays behind in Sparta to fight a different kind of battle, political and personal. Played by Lena Headey, Gorgo is strong and intelligent, a leader in her own right. She reminds us that while men are dying on the battlefield, others are fighting for truth and justice back home. The characters in 300 feel like icons. Leonidas isn't just a king. He's the living symbol of resistance. His soldiers aren't just warriors. They're brothers, united in purpose and willing to give everything. Even the villains are memorable. Xerxes, played by Rodrigo Santoro, is unlike any enemy seen before. He's towering, adorned with gold, and speaks with a calm, almost hypnotic voice. His presence is chilling, not because he yells or rages, but because he believes completely in his godlike power. The contrast between Xerxes' luxury and the Spartans' raw grit makes the conflict even more striking. And yet, beneath all the action and spectacle, the movie tells a deeply human story. It's about men who know they are going to die, but choose to stand their ground anyway. It's about loyalty, pride, and what it means to live and die with honor. Every Spartan knows their chances are slim, but they don't flinch. They believe that dying in battle for their people is the highest form of glory. This gives the movie an emotional weight that hits even harder than the slow-motion sword fights. You care about these characters. You admire their bravery. You feel the loss as the battle slowly takes its toll. What also makes 300 unique is its narration. The story is told by Dilios, a Spartan soldier who survives to tell the tale. His voice, full of passion and pride, turns the events into legend. It reminds us that this is not a simple retelling of facts. It's a myth passed down through generations. That storytelling style adds another layer to the movie, making it feel both personal and epic at the same time. It's not about what exactly happened. It's about how it felt, how it was remembered, and why it mattered. And when the final moments arrive, they land with power. The Spartans, betrayed and surrounded, refuse to surrender. Leonidas, standing tall in the face of death, throws his spear, not to kill Xerxes, but to prove he's mortal. It's a final act of defiance, a reminder that no king is truly a god. The Spartans fall, but their stand inspires all of Greece to rise and fight. The story ends not with defeat, but with hope. The legend of the 300 becomes a spark that lights the fire of rebellion. This powerful mix of visuals, storytelling, and raw emotion is what made 300 a cultural phenomenon. It wasn't just popular, it became part of the larger pop culture conversation. People quoted it, parroted it, memed it. The line, "This is Sparta," became iconic almost overnight. The movie's style influenced other films, TV shows, even video games. It showed that audiences were hungry for bold, stylized stories that weren't afraid to push boundaries. Critics were divided, but audiences connected with it in a big way. Some loved the artistic direction, others the intensity of the action. For many, it was a movie that stayed with them long after the credits rolled. It offered more than just entertainment, it offered an experience. And that's why people kept coming back to it. It didn't try to be everything. It knew what it was, a cinematic epic, and leaned into that completely. There's also something timeless about the themes of 300. Standing up for freedom, choosing honor over safety, fighting not because you think you'll win, but because it's the right thing to do. These are ideas that resonate no matter the era. And in a time when many movies felt the same, 300 stood out. It dared to be bold. It embraced its mythic tone and never backed down. Of course, much of the movie's success also comes from Gerard Butler's unforgettable performance. As Leonidas, he is commanding, fierce, and surprisingly tender at times. He gives the character real weight, making him more than just a shouting warrior. You believe in his leadership. You believe in his cause. And when he finally falls, it feels like the loss of a legend, not just a man. The rest of the cast also brings their A-game, with performances that match the film's energy and tone perfectly. Technically, 300 was ahead of its time. The way it used CGI wasn't just to show big effects, it was to create a world that felt different from ours. The backgrounds, the lighting, the slow motion. It all worked together to transport the viewer into a space where every moment felt larger than life. The soundtrack, too, played a huge role. Heavy drums, haunting vocals, and intense music made the battles feel even more powerful. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't trying to be. It was loud, proud, and unforgettable. For viewers today, going back to watch 300 is more than just revisiting a movie. It's about stepping into a cinematic moment that defined a style, a tone, and a movement. It's a reminder of how storytelling, when done with passion and vision, can turn a small historical event into an eternal legend. It's not about whether 300 Spartans actually held off the Persian army in the exact way the movie shows. It's about what their story means to us, about bravery in the face of fear, about choosing what's right no matter the cost. The story begins not with war, but with a harsh lesson in survival. In ancient Sparta, children are not born into comfort. They are forged. The movie opens with a chilling glimpse into the brutal world that shapes a Spartan. From the moment a boy is born, he's examined for strength. Any sign of weakness and he is discarded. The ones who survive are trained, mentally, physically, and emotionally, through pain, hunger, and endless discipline. One of those boys is Leonidas. We see him as a child, alone in the frozen wild, facing a giant wolf with nothing but a spear and his instincts. He kills the beast not by brute strength, but through strategy and courage. This scene isn't just backstory, it sets the tone. This is the kind of man Leonidas will become. Clever, brave, unshakable, a king forged by hardship. Years pass and Leonidas now rules Sparta, but the peace he enjoys is short-lived. One day, a Persian messenger arrives, cloaked in silk and arrogance, demanding that Sparta bow to Xerxes, the Persian king who claims to be a god. Xerxes doesn't just want tribute. He wants submission. He wants every nation to kneel, to accept his rule without question. The messenger presents gifts and threats in the same breath, expecting obedience. But Leonidas isn't a man who kneels. He listens silently, his eyes calm but sharp. And then, in one explosive moment, he kicks the messenger into a bottomless pit, declaring the now iconic line, "This is Sparta." That moment cracks open the story, releasing the tension that's been building. War is no longer a possibility, it's inevitable. But in Sparta, kings don't act alone. Leonidas must seek the approval of the ephors, twisted, corrupt priests who live in a dark, sickly temple on top of the city. These men, pale and diseased, claim to speak for the gods. They listen to whispers, lick poisons, and hide behind tradition. Leonidas presents his case for war, arguing that the Persian threat cannot be ignored. But the ephors refuse. They say it's sacrilege to go to war during the holy festival of Carnea. Their decision is final. But we soon learn why. They've been bought. The Persian gold has already reached them through a traitorous Spartan named Theron, a sly, ambitious politician who cares more about power than honor. The system is rotten, and Leonidas knows it. But he also knows how to bend the rules. If he can't march his army officially, he'll take only 300 men, his personal guard, who will walk with him not as soldiers, but as volunteers. This subtle rebellion allows him to follow the law without surrendering to it. As he prepares to leave, he shares a quiet moment with Queen Gorgo, who understands what's at stake. She doesn't beg him to stay. She doesn't cry. She simply tells him to return with his shield or on it. These words are not cold. They are full of Spartan love, the kind that values strength and sacrifice above all else. Leonidas leads his 300 warriors toward Thermopylae, a narrow coastal pass where a small force might stand against a massive army. As they march, they are joined by other Greeks, unsure and nervous, but inspired by the Spartans' confidence. Along the way, they meet a deformed outcast named Ephialtes, whose parents fled Sparta to protect him from being cast out. Now he begs Leonidas for a chance to fight. He cannot raise his shield properly, which means he would break the phalanx formation. Leonidas, despite seeing his desperation, refuses, not out of cruelty but because the line must hold. Ephialtes leaves, ashamed and angry, a spark that will later ignite betrayal. When they arrive at the hot gates, the location becomes a character in itself. It's narrow, steep, and perfectly suited for defense. The Spartans get to work immediately, building a wall from the stones and the bodies of their enemies. Their confidence is absolute. They don't see themselves as doomed. They see themselves as chosen, as men whose names will be remembered forever. Then the Persians arrive, and they just keep coming. Tens of thousands of soldiers, led by generals who believe victory is already theirs. But Leonidas stands calm. As the first wave attacks, the Spartans form their wall of shields, their spears gleaming. What follows is not a battle, it's a masterclass in discipline. The Spartans don't just fight. They move as one with perfect timing, turning defense into offense in seconds. The Persians break like waves against a cliff, their numbers useless in the tight pass. These early battles are brutal but beautiful. Director Zack Snyder uses slow motion not to glamorize the violence, but to highlight the precision and power of the Spartan warriors. Every stab, Every swing, every drop of blood tells part of the story. The audience doesn't just watch the fight, they feel it. We see Leonidas moving through the battlefield like a storm, unstoppable, untouchable. We see his men rally behind him not because they fear him, but because they trust him completely. After each wave, the Spartans push back the bodies and prepare for the next. But the Persians don't just send soldiers. Xerxes, intrigued by these 300 warriors, sends in his elite guard, the Immortals. Dressed in black with silver masks, they are said to be undefeatable. But even they fall before the Spartan line. The battles grow stranger. War rhinos, giant beasts, disfigured warriors. All are unleashed in Xerxes' attempt to break the 300. But nothing works. The Spartans fight with humor and fury, making jokes as they kill, holding their line with pride. Between battles, we begin to understand more about Leonidas, not just as a warrior, but as a leader. He walks among his men. He eats with them. He listens. He doesn't ask for blind loyalty, he earns it. We also see the bond between the soldiers. One of them, Astinos, fights beside his father, Captain Artemis. Their relationship is both warm and sharp, filled with teasing and pride. It reminds us that these are not faceless warriors. They are sons, fathers, brothers. Meanwhile, back in Sparta, Queen Gorgo fights her own war. She tries to rally support in the council to send reinforcements. But Theron stands in her way, whispering lies and spreading doubt. He plays the political game with cruelty, blocking every path forward. Gorgo remains strong, but the pressure is building. She knows time is running out. If the 300 fall without help, the rest of Greece could fall too. Back at the front, something shifts. One night, Leonidas is invited to speak with Xerxes himself. They meet in the center of the battlefield, surrounded by torches and silence. Xerxes appears like a god, tall, calm, covered in jewels. He offers Leonidas everything: power, riches, the title of warlord. All he asks is that Leonidas kneels. For a moment it's quiet. Then Leonidas looks up and says something that cuts through all the pomp and power. "You are generous as you are divine, but I am afraid." Xerxes smiles, thinking he's won. But Leonidas continues, "Afraid you'll never see a king kneel." That moment is electric. It's not just about pride, it's about principle. Leonidas would rather die than bow to a false god. As the Persians prepare their next attack, the film's tone darkens. We see Ephialtes, still bitter, now welcomed into Xerxes' tent. He reveals the secret path around the pass, a mountain trail that could allow the Persians to flank the Spartans. In exchange, he's promised riches, women, and a place in Xerxes' army. It's a heartbreaking moment. His desire to belong turns into betrayal. He didn't want to destroy the 300, he just wanted to be one of them. Unaware of the betrayal, the Spartans continue to fight, unaware that their time is running out. But cracks begin to show. In one battle, Astinos is decapitated. His father, Artemis, watches in horror. The pain is raw and immediate, but he doesn't break. He fights harder, channeling his grief into fury. Leonidas sees this and feels the weight of every loss. These are not nameless soldiers. These are men with families, memories, lives. The first half of 300 ends not with defeat, but with rising tension. The battles have been won, but danger is closing in. Leonidas senses something is wrong. The numbers don't add up. The Persians are stalling, regrouping, planning something. The path behind them might no longer be secure. The fight is no longer about survival, it's about legacy. Leonidas begins to realize that the stand of the 300 is not about victory. It's about sending a message, about lighting a fire that will spread across Greece and inspire the world. As the sun rises once more over the narrow cliffs of Thermopylae, there's a sense of unease in the air. The Spartans, bloodied, battered, but still standing, know something has shifted. Leonidas senses it. His instincts, honed through years of war and discipline, tell him this isn't just another wave of enemies. There's silence on the Persian side, and silence is never a good sign on the battlefield. Then the truth is revealed, not through battle, but through a messenger who rushes into the Spartan camp. The betrayal has happened. The mountain pass behind them, their only hope of keeping the Persians at bay, has been exposed. The traitor is Ephialtes, the hunchbacked outcast they had turned away, not out of cruelty, but necessity. In his heartbreak, his desperation to matter, he's given the Persians the key to surround them. And now the 300 are trapped. But Leonidas doesn't panic. He doesn't show fear. Instead, he gathers his men and tells them the truth. Reinforcements will not come. The enemy will strike from both sides. They are going to die. And yet, his voice remains steady. He doesn't ask them to flee. He reminds them what it means to be Spartan, that their deaths will echo through history, that the sacrifice they make today will inspire a nation tomorrow. Some allies, like the Thespians, choose to stay and die beside them. Others, like the Arcadians, fall back to warn the rest of Greece. Leonidas allows his trusted warrior, Dilios, who's wounded in one eye, to return home, not as an escape but as a duty. He must carry the story. He must tell the world what happened here. As Dilios rides away, heart heavy, the remaining Spartans prepare for one final stand. Not for victory, but for honor. But before the storm crashes down, the film shifts. We return to Sparta, where Queen Gorgo is doing everything she can to save her husband's life and support his mission. She steps into the shadows of political power, where words are as dangerous as swords. She appeals to the Spartan Council, a room filled with skeptical and stubborn men, for support. She asks for reinforcements. She pleads for them to see the truth. But Theron, the corrupt politician who's been working behind the scenes with the Persians, slanders her. He spreads lies, hints at scandal, and turns the room against her. Still, Gorgo stands her ground. She is every bit as fierce as the warriors on the front line. And when she offers herself up in private to Theron, trading her dignity for a chance at saving Sparta, it feels less like submission and more like a tactical sacrifice. But Theron, filled with arrogance, makes a mistake. He taunts her, believing he has all the power, until Gorgo plunges a blade into his gut during a council meeting, revealing a pouch of Persian gold from his cloak as he falls. The room erupts, not just in shock, but realization. The truth is out. Theron was the traitor. His death frees the council from his manipulation. At last, Sparta will act. Back at Thermopylae, the final battle begins. The sky darkens. The air is thick with smoke and dust. And from both sides, the Persian army closes in. But the Spartans don't cower. They tighten their formation, shields interlocked, eyes locked forward. Leonidas walks between them like a father among sons, calm and proud. There's no fear in his voice, only resolve. The men don't fight for survival. They fight for something greater, a cause, an ideal, a future. The clash is brutal. The Spartans cut through the enemy with rage and precision, but this time the numbers are too great. The Persians pour in from both sides. The phalanx begins to break. One by one, warriors fall. Captain Artemis, grieving his son's death, charges forward with nothing left to lose. He fights like a man possessed, bringing down dozens before he too is overwhelmed. The bodies pile up. The blood soaks the earth. But the Spartans refuse to surrender. Then the sky opens up. Xerxes arrives, carried on a golden throne, surrounded by guards, watching like a god surveying his domain. He's confident. He believes he's finally broken the unbreakable. He sends a final messenger to offer Leonidas one last chance. Bow and his men will be spared. But Leonidas has no intention of kneeling. Instead, he seizes the moment. He removes his helmet, drops his shield, lowers his spear, not out of weakness but to throw. In a sudden, perfect motion, he hurls his spear through the air. It cuts across the battlefield, past guards and banners, and slices Xerxes across the cheek. It's not a fatal blow, but it draws blood. And in that single drop, Leonidas proves what the entire war has been about. Xerxes is not a god. He bleeds. He is mortal. He can be hurt. The illusion is broken. In that moment, Xerxes is no longer invincible. And the Spartans, even as they fall under a rain of arrows, have won something far greater than the battle. They've shattered the myth of Persian divinity. The arrows fall like black rain. The screen fades to red. One by one, the 300 are struck down. Leonidas is the last to fall, arms spread, eyes toward the sky, defiant even in death. But the story doesn't end with his death. That's only the beginning. The film shifts again to Dilios, now returned to Sparta, standing before thousands of Greek soldiers. He tells them the story, not just of the battle, but of the courage, the honor, the sacrifice. His words aren't just narration. They are a call to arms, a legacy passed on, a spark turned into flame. The final scene jumps forward 1 year. The battlefield is now a different place. Not a last stand, but a full-scale war. 10,000 Spartans, 30,000 Greeks, all gathered at Plataea to face the Persian army once again. Dilios, now a leader, stands ready. He carries Leonidas's spear and his memory. He reminds his men why they fight, not just for revenge, but for freedom, for unity, for everything the 300 stood for. The camera pulls back. The two armies charge. The roar of battle begins again. And as the screen fades, it's not sadness that remains, but fire, inspiration, the kind of story that lasts forever. Because 300 isn't just about war. It's about what a single act of courage can do, about how 300 warriors refused to kneel, and in doing so showed a world how to stand. In the world of 300, battles are fought not just with swords and shields, but with spirit, purpose, and conviction. And while the spectacle, the sweeping visuals, the thunderous combat, the immortal lines, draws you in, it's the characters who give this mythic war its soul. Each one burns with a reason to fight. Each one carries history in their eyes. And from the defiant king to the disfigured traitor, every character in 300 stands as a symbol of something far greater than themselves. At the center of it all stands King Leonidas. Played by Gerard Butler in the role that redefined his career, Leonidas is more than just a warrior king. He is the embodiment of Spartan pride, honor, and defiance. From the moment he appears on screen, his presence is magnetic. He doesn't rule with cruelty, but with clarity. Every action he takes, whether sparring with his son, consulting his queen, or leading his warriors, is grounded in principle. His motivations are never clouded. He fights for freedom, not just for Sparta but for all of Greece. He's not blind to the cost. In fact, he faces it head-on. His decisions carry weight because he knows what's at stake. The lives of his people, the future of his land, and the soul of a nation under threat. What makes Leonidas unforgettable isn't just his defiance. It's his balance. He's fierce, but not reckless. Proud, but not arrogant. He challenges power without becoming a tyrant himself. When faced with the Persian messenger demanding submission, he doesn't strike out in rage. He listens. And then, when the time is right, he chooses action, not as a burst of emotion, but as a statement. That moment when he roars, "This is Sparta," and sends the messenger plummeting into the abyss, it doesn't feel like anger. It feels like destiny. It's a man drawing a line in the sand and daring the world to cross it. Gerard Butler's performance elevates Leonidas from legend to living, breathing force. His voice is thunder. His gaze is steel. Yet, there's vulnerability beneath all that strength. In quiet moments with Queen Gorgo, in the way he watches his men fall, in the silence before the final battle, there's emotion, doubt, love. It's what makes him human, and what makes his final stand so moving. Leonidas doesn't just go to war. He chooses to become a symbol, knowing that his death will inspire more than his survival ever could. Beside him, shaping him, is Queen Gorgo, played with sharp grace by Lena Headey. Gorgo is not just a queen who waits in the shadows. She is the spine of Sparta in Leonidas's absence. Her strength is not in armor or blade, but in conviction. She knows the politics of the city, the rot within its power structures, and the danger of silence. When she urges Leonidas to follow his heart and act, even without the council's blessing, we see a woman who understands the cost of action, and the greater cost of inaction. Headey brings depth to Gorgo with minimal dialogue. Her expressions do the talking. A glance, a nod, a single tear. Her pain is never shown as weakness, it's shown as fuel. When she walks into the council chambers alone, to face men who underestimate her, she does so with dignity carved into every step. And when she plunges a blade into Theron, the corrupt politician who betrayed them both, she does so not out of rage but as a final truth. A reminder that justice can come in many forms. Theron himself, played by Dominic West, serves as the snake in the grass. He isn't a man of honor or ideology, he's a man of ambition. While the Spartans die on the front lines, he plays games in the shadows. He accepts Persian gold, manipulates the council, and slanders the queen. He is the threat that hides behind civilization's mask. Smooth-talking, self-serving, and completely unworthy of the land he pretends to protect. His presence in the story reminds us that not all enemies wear armor or carry swords. Some destroy nations with words and whispers. Then there's Dilios, played by David Wenham, the narrator, the storyteller, the keeper of memory. He's not just a voice weaving the legend. He's part of it. He fights alongside the 300, loses an eye in the chaos, and is entrusted by Leonidas to carry the story home. His transformation is subtle but vital. At the start, he's a soldier with a sharp tongue and quick wit. But by the end, he becomes the echo of the Spartan sacrifice. His speech, delivered over the final shots of the film, isn't just moving, it's necessary. Through his words, the 300 never truly die. They live on in every man who hears their tale and chooses to stand. Among the warriors, we meet Captain Artemis, the hardened veteran, and his son Astinos, young, eager, and full of fire. Their bond is unspoken but strong. Artemis doesn't coddle his son. He trains him, fights beside him, trusts him. And when Astinos is killed in battle, his head cruelly taken by a Persian, the grief that explodes in Artemis is raw, immediate, and unforgettable. His scream pierces through the clash of swords. And yet, he doesn't falter. He charges into the fray, not for vengeance, but for duty. His arc is a reminder of the cost of glory, that behind every warrior is a father, a son, a man with something to lose. Astinos himself symbolizes the next generation of Sparta. Bold, untested, but ready. His journey, though brief, reflects the Spartan ideal. Live with honor, die with purpose. His presence adds emotional weight to every loss, because it's not just seasoned soldiers who fall. It's young men with futures that will never come. Then there's Stelios, charming, loyal, fierce. Played by Michael Fassbender in an early but unforgettable performance, Stelios brings levity to the battlefield. His banter, his swagger, his fearless energy, all make him a standout. But his loyalty to Leonidas is what defines him. When a fellow warrior wavers, Stelios holds the line. When death surrounds them, he charges forward with a grin. He fights not just for Sparta, but for the man leading them. His presence reminds us that camaraderie is not just a side note in war. It is the soul of it. And then there is Xerxes, the so-called God King, brought to life by Rodrigo Santoro in a performance that is both mesmerizing and unsettling. Xerxes doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. He speaks softly, moves slowly, and towers over all who stand before him. Covered in gold, adorned with jewels, he represents the seduction of power. But behind that calm exterior lies a desperate need to be worshipped. His belief in his own divinity is not confidence, it's obsession. When Leonidas refuses to kneel, Xerxes doesn't respond with fury. He responds with disbelief. Because for a man who sees himself as divine, resistance is unimaginable. Santoro's portrayal makes Xerxes more than a villain. He is the embodiment of everything the Spartans reject: luxury without sacrifice, dominance without honor, power without truth. And when Leonidas wounds him, drawing that single line of blood, it's not just an injury. It's a crack in a god's illusion. A reminder that no matter how tall a throne may be, every man still bleeds red. And finally, there is Ephialtes, perhaps the most tragic character in the entire film. Deformed, desperate, and cast aside from birth, Ephialtes wants only one thing: to be part of something greater. When he approaches Leonidas, begging to fight, he isn't asking for glory, he's asking for belonging. His body, twisted and weak, can't hold the shield high enough to protect the phalanx formation. Leonidas refuses him, gently but firmly, and that refusal, meant to protect the unit, destroys Ephialtes' hope. What follows is a heartbreaking transformation. Rejected by the Spartans, he's embraced by the Persians, not for who he is, but for what he knows. He leads them through the hidden path behind the cliffs, not out of evil, out of pain, out of loneliness. And when he's rewarded by Xerxes, surrounded by gold and women, his face doesn't show triumph. It shows emptiness. His betrayal is not grand, it's pitiful. He becomes the man who doomed heroes, not because he hated them, but because he couldn't be one of them. Rewatching 300 is never quite the same experience as the first time. On the surface, it's a thunderous, stylized war film full of blood, grit, and iconic one-liners. But beneath that visual power lies something more subtle, an intricate world stitched with ancient symbolism, cinematic references, and carefully planted moments of foreshadowing. Each frame pulses with detail, and once you start peeling back the layers, the film reveals itself not just as a brutal retelling of a battle, but as a masterclass in how myth and meaning can be carved into every shadow, line, and glance. It starts in the very first moments, in the wintry flashback of young Leonidas in the wild. On the surface, it's a coming-of-age trial, a lesson in Spartan survival. But pay close attention to the wolf. The way it circles, the glowing eyes, the way it towers over the boy. It's no ordinary animal. The wolf, in ancient mythology, often represents fear, chaos, the uncontrollable wild. It's also a reflection of Leonidas's enemy to come, something larger, more powerful, seemingly unstoppable. When the young Leonidas defeats the wolf not by strength but by forcing it into a narrow space, just as the Spartans later trapped the Persians at the Hot Gates, it becomes the film's first piece of foreshadowing. The wolf is Xerxes, and the lesson learned in childhood becomes the strategy in adulthood. That same early scene is also rich with symbolic framing. The boy emerges from the shadows into blinding white snow after defeating the beast. His silhouette against the wind, bloodied but alive, mirrors how he later stands among the fallen, one man against the storm. It's not just a hero's beginning, it's a prophecy of how he'll end. Even the infamous "This is Sparta" scene carries echoes of deeper meaning. As Leonidas kicks the Persian envoy into the pit, it's not just dramatic, it's deliberate. Look at the pit again. Perfectly circular, dark, and bottomless. It looks less like a practical disposal tool and more like a symbolic entrance to the underworld. Leonidas doesn't just kill the messenger, he sends him to Hades. The moment isn't just defiance. It's the start of a descent into death for all 300 men. The doorway has been opened, and right before that kick, another detail rewards the observant. The envoy presents Xerxes' message with skull-covered jewelry and golden medallions. One of them features a stylized sun, the emblem of divine kingship in many ancient empires. But in Greek culture, the sun belonged to Apollo, god of reason, order, and light. That symbol, offered as a gift, becomes ironic. It's not order that Xerxes brings, but tyranny. The sun's imagery is corrupted, and the Spartans reject it. Symbolically, they reject false gods wrapped in golden light. Throughout the film, the number 300 itself is quietly repeated in visual cues. From the layers of Spartan shields stacked in the phalanx formations, to the number of enemy skulls that appear in certain slow-motion shots, to the banners that flap over the cliffs, frames are carefully composed in groups of 3 or clusters that reflect the Spartans' numerical unity. Even the way the 300 stand in formation echoes the shape of a spearhead, sharp, triangular, and singular in purpose. These aren't random formations. They're visual representations of their name and their resolve. One of the more subtle pieces of foreshadowing comes with Ephialtes. When he first appears, he's cloaked in rags, his body hunched and twisted. His approach is almost shadowy, like a ghost trying to step into the light. Leonidas offers him a moment of hope, but when Ephialtes fails to lift the shield, Leonidas gently denies him a place in the line. At first, the rejection feels tragic, but there's something important in the blocking of the scene. Ephialtes is shown in broken profile, his shoulder slumped where a soldier's should be square. Leonidas, on the other hand, is centered, upright, framed by the circle of the shield wall behind him. Ephialtes is outside that circle literally and figuratively. The visual language is telling us the decision is already made, not by Leonidas but by fate. When Ephialtes later returns in Xerxes's golden tent, another visual transformation occurs. His armor is lavish, heavy, and too big. He's draped in excess, not empowered by it. His eyes are filled with pain, not pride. His betrayal is already painted on his body. And the camp itself is telling. The Persian war tent is not a place of command. It's a place of temptation. Golden statues, dancers, firelit shadows. It feels less like a military headquarters and more like a corrupted temple. And this contrast between Spartan minimalism and Persian decadence is more than aesthetic. It's a cultural battle. A quiet war of values. Spears and shields versus silk and gold. One thrives on sacrifice, the other on seduction. The film's color palette, dominated by golds, reds, and shadows, also reinforces these themes. Sparta is always shown with harsh light, brown rock, red cloaks, sharp edges. It's a place of reality and pain. The Persian world, in contrast, is soft, glowing, dreamlike. But that beauty is misleading. Xerxes floats rather than walks. His voice is almost hypnotic. His height exaggerated. It's all designed to feel otherworldly, but underneath is fragility. His blood proves that. And speaking of blood, there's symbolism in how it's shown. The blood of Spartans splashes dark and heavy. It's grounded, real. But when Persian soldiers fall, their wounds often burst in stylized, almost artistic sprays, fountains rather than bursts. Snyder leans into the surreal, making their deaths feel like parts of a painting rather than real loss. This distinction adds to the idea that the Persians are part of a theatrical illusion, form over substance. There are also moments where dialogue acts as hidden prophecy. Early in the campaign, when Stelios jokes about fighting in the shade, the line seems like casual bravado, but later, when the Persian archers blot out the sun with arrows, and the Spartans continue to fight in literal shadow, that line returns with quiet weight. What was a joke becomes reality. And the fact that they continue to stand, even when sunlight disappears, becomes a metaphor. These men aren't guided by light, they are guided by belief. Dilios's role as narrator adds another layer of hidden meaning. His stories are not always literal. They are heightened, mythic, and exaggerated, and this is intentional. He is telling the legend of the 300, not just the facts. So when we see giant beasts, monstrous warriors, and godlike kings, we are not seeing documentary truth. We are seeing the story as Sparta would remember it. Dilios's narration isn't a record. It's a legacy. The entire film, in fact, could be seen as a dramatized memory. One shaped by the emotions, ideals, and nationalism of the people who lived through it. And that's what makes the stylized visuals make perfect sense. They are memory made myth. There are even cinematic Easter eggs for film fans. The slow-motion, comic panel-like framing pays direct homage to Frank Miller's graphic novel, with many shots taken almost frame for frame. In the final battle, the slow-motion spear throw by Leonidas echoes Achilles' dramatic final attack in Troy, another stylized mythic warrior film. But where Achilles seeks glory, Leonidas seeks meaning. One fights for name, the other fights for nation. And in a blink-and-you-miss-it moment, Xerxes's throne bears carvings that resemble the Babylonian winged gods, ancient symbols of. Before the first sword was swung, before a single "This is Sparta" was shouted into cinematic history, 300 was a massive question mark in the film industry. A surreal war epic based on a stylized graphic novel? A violent, highly saturated visual experiment with almost no real-world sets? Sounded impossible, too risky, too odd, and maybe too bold. But what happened behind the scenes of 300 turned out to be just as wild, unconventional, and strangely heroic as the film itself. The year was 2005 when principal photography began, And instead of flying cast and crew to exotic locations in Greece or building sprawling historical sets, director Zack Snyder made an unorthodox choice. They would shoot nearly the entire film on a soundstage in Montreal, using blue and green screens. For weeks, the actors performed in a barren warehouse surrounded by empty space, acting against imaginary cliffs, phantom armies, and weather that didn't exist. Only a few props were real, some rocks, a tree, a few walls. Everything else? Created later in post. This wasn't just a budget decision, it was a creative one. Snyder wanted the film to look like Frank Miller's graphic novel come to life. Every frame was meant to feel painted, dreamlike, exaggerated. So instead of grounding the film in realism, he embraced fantasy. The sky could be blood red. The cliffs could stretch unnaturally high. A Persian god-king could float above the ground. This vision required an incredible amount of trust from everyone involved. The actors had to believe in a world they couldn't see, and the crew had to build a myth out of digital air. Gerard Butler, who played King Leonidas, admitted in interviews that acting against blue screens was one of the most mentally exhausting things he had ever done. He wasn't responding to a horde of Persian warriors. He was lunging at tennis balls taped to sticks. The cliffs, the temples, even the epic sky behind him. None of it was there. Every battle cry, every heroic stance, had to be summoned from imagination alone. There were times, Butler said, where I felt like I was losing my mind. Just me, a fake sword, and a sea of blue walls. What made things even more intense? The physical demands. To play Spartans, the cast had to look like warriors carved from marble. But 300 wasn't interested in relying on costumes or padding. Those abs? All real. Snyder brought in Mark Twight, a former elite climber turned hardcore trainer, to whip the cast into shape. And what Twight created wasn't a typical workout, it was Spartan boot camp. Grueling circuits. No machines. No rest. Pure punishment. 6 days a week, multiple hours a day, sometimes finishing with something known as the 300 workout. A routine of 300 reps, including pull-ups, deadlifts, push-ups, box jumps, and more. The results were staggering. Butler and his fellow castmates, including Michael Fassbender, Stelios, and David Wenham, Dilios, didn't just look like warriors, they became them. And perhaps most impressive of all, many of them were not action stars before this film. Butler had never led an action film of this scale. Fassbender was relatively unknown. Yet their transformation, physically and emotionally, sold the illusion completely. One of the stranger stories from the set involves Rodrigo Santoro, the Brazilian actor who played Xerxes. In real life, Santoro is average height, soft-spoken, and mild-mannered. But in 300, he's a towering, godlike figure, draped in gold and eyeliner. With a voice so deep it sounds like it echoes off mountains. To create Xerxes' monstrous look, Santoro spent hours in the makeup chair every morning. Up to 6 hours a day, being fitted with piercings, chain jewelry, prosthetics, and massive shoes that added more than a foot to his height. Those shoes, in fact, nearly destroyed him. During one early shoot, Santoro tried walking across the stage in his 7-inch platform boots and tripped hard, sending gold jewelry flying. Crew members rushed to help him up, and one reportedly said, "You all right, Your Majesty?" Santoro laughed, but it was a reminder of how absurd some days on set could feel. He was a god who could barely walk. Then there were the arrows. You'd think with so much CGI, no one would be in danger on set. But the fight choreography was real. Swords clashed, shields slammed, and while the Persian arrows that rained from the sky were added digitally, the stunt work around them was brutal. Butler accidentally cracked a fellow actor's nose during a fight scene. On another day, Fassbender got knocked flat by a miscalculated swing. But no one complained. In fact, Butler said the injuries were badges of honor. We were in it together. We felt like a real army. One of the most mind-bending facts. Zack Snyder shot almost 1,500 separate takes just to get all the slow-motion battle moments right. He didn't want to just show violence. He wanted to choreograph it like a dance. He used a technique called speed ramping, which changes the speed of a shot mid-scene. So a sword swing might start slow, speed up mid-arc, then slow again as blood flies. It became one of the film's signature styles. But getting those transitions smooth required endless repetition. Snyder pushed for perfection, sometimes reshooting a single motion 30 times until the timing was flawless. And when it came to post-production, that's where the magic happened. The film was essentially rebuilt in a computer lab. Digital artists layered textures, clouds, glows, and lighting onto every frame. Even the actors' cloaks were enhanced digitally to make them flow more dramatically. The blood? Entirely fake. Snyder didn't use practical effects for splatter. He added it later, stylized to match the surreal aesthetic. In fact, one producer joked, "No one actually bled on this set, but the final cut looked like a butcher shop." But behind all that stylized gore and glory, controversy simmered. When 300 hit theaters, some critics and historians were quick to accuse it of historical inaccuracy, nationalism, and even political allegory. Some saw the Persians' monstrous depiction as racially charged. Others interpreted the Spartans' last stand as a thinly veiled metaphor for Western resistance against Eastern ideology, especially given the film's release during a time of heightened global tension. Zack Snyder, however, was quick to clarify. 300, he said, was never meant to be historically accurate. It was the world as told through the eyes of a Spartan warrior, a mythic version of events, passed down through oral tradition, a kind of fever dream of glory and death. The Persians weren't meant to be literal. They were how a Spartan might imagine an invading army. Beautiful, grotesque, and larger than life. The controversy didn't slow the film's momentum. 300 became a global sensation, earning hundreds of millions at the box office and launching a wave of stylized action films in its wake. But perhaps more importantly, it changed careers. Gerard Butler became a household name. Zack Snyder cemented his visual style and eventually went on to helm Watchmen, Man of Steel, and his own take on the Justice League. And Frank Miller's graphic novel sales skyrocketed, as new readers discovered the illustrated origins of the blood-soaked epic. But some of the most unforgettable stories come from the quieter moments. Like the time Butler, exhausted and bruised, stayed on set long after his final scene just to watch others shoot. Or the way the crew celebrated Rap Day not with a party, but with one last group workout, Spartan style. Or how David Wenham, who played Dilios, wrote down parts of his narration by hand to help him deliver them with more weight. These weren't actors playing warriors. For a brief, strange, intense period of time, they were warriors. One final piece of strangeness? There was almost no rain on set. That might sound trivial, but it mattered. Snyder and his crew needed dry conditions for lighting and compositing. Any rain would mess with the digital layering. Miraculously, Montreal, known for its unpredictable skies, stayed dry nearly the entire shoot. The crew joked that even the weather was afraid of the Spartans. And perhaps that's the most fitting metaphor for everything that happened behind the scenes of 300. The odds were stacked against them. The setup was weird. The technology was new. The risks were massive. But somehow, like the warriors they portrayed, the cast and crew stood firm, locked in formation, and made cinematic history. Not because it was easy, but because they believed in the story they were telling. 300 is, after all, a film about defying the impossible. And in the world behind the curtain, that spirit burned just as fiercely. From the very first frame of 300, it's clear this is no ordinary war film. The visual palette, the heightened performances, and the pounding soundtrack all work together to prepare you for something epic. Not just in scale, but in emotional resonance. But it's the film's key moments, those unforgettable scenes, that truly carve it into cultural memory. They're not just about action or spectacle. They carry deep emotional weight and thematic significance that shape how viewers experience the entire story. Take the "This is Sparta" scene, for example. It's become one of the most iconic moments in modern cinema, but its impact goes far beyond the shout and the kick into the pit. The scene functions as a microcosm of the entire film's central conflict, the clash between unyielding freedom and imposed submission. When the Persian envoy arrives demanding submission, his arrogance is palpable. He speaks as if the Spartans have no choice but to bow. But Leonidas's response isn't just rebellion. It's an affirmation of identity, a declaration that Sparta will never be silenced or subjugated. The sheer physicality of the kick, combined with the sudden, thunderous sound design, jolts the audience out of passivity and thrusts them into the Spartan world. Emotionally, it's empowering. There's a primal satisfaction in watching a tyrant's messenger be cast down like that. Critics and audiences alike have noted how that moment sets the tone. It isn't just spectacle. It's a statement of principle. It establishes the Spartans' defiant spirit, which echoes throughout the film, coloring every battle, every dialogue. The scene's minimalist dialogue combined with explosive action distills the essence of Spartan identity. Fierce, proud, uncompromising. This scene is not just a visual highlight. It's the heartbeat of the story. Moving forward, the battle sequences deserve deeper scrutiny. The first major clash between the Spartans and the Persian forces at the narrow mountain pass is a masterclass in tension and choreography. What makes this sequence so gripping isn't simply the bloodshed. It's the way the film uses the geography to shape the fight's emotional intensity. The narrow pass means the Spartans fight shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield. This close formation visually reinforces themes of unity, brotherhood, and sacrifice. Each soldier's survival depends on the man beside him. When an enemy breaks through, it's not just a tactical breach. It's a break in the chain of trust, which sends ripples of fear through the line. Audiences respond viscerally to this because it taps into universal themes: community, loyalty, and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Emotionally, the sequence makes viewers feel trapped alongside the Spartans, experiencing the claustrophobia, the desperation, and the thrill of survival. It's no surprise that critics praised this battle for being both brutally realistic in its raw emotion and yet stylized enough to feel like mythic storytelling. Another scene that resonates deeply is the death of Stelios. Early in the film, Stelios is introduced as the spirited warrior who quips, "Tonight, we dine in hell." This line, which has become a rallying cry for fans, carries a heavy emotional charge in context. When Stelios falls in battle, the weight of that defiant phrase settles over the audience in a wave of somber reflection. It's no longer just bravado, it becomes a testament to sacrifice. His death, portrayed with brutal honesty and slowed in the film's signature style, underscores the human cost of war. Critics highlight this moment as a key turning point, where the film shifts from energetic defiance to sober reality, reminding viewers that beneath the mythic spectacle lie real lives lost. The performances in these moments are critical to their success. Michael Fassbender's Stelios, though limited in screen time, brings infectious energy and relatability. His ability to express humor, bravery, and vulnerability within a few scenes leaves a lasting impression. The audience invests emotionally because Stelios feels like someone they could know, a friend who would stand and fight beside them. This human connection elevates the film beyond action, grounding it in emotional truth. The political scenes in Sparta also warrant analysis. Queen Gorgo's confrontation with the council is a masterstroke of tension and subtle power dynamics. Lena Headey's portrayal infuses the scenes with a quiet, steely resolve. Unlike the blood-soaked battlefield moments, these political sequences rely on dialogue, eye contact, and subtext. When Gorgo pleads for support to send aid to the front, her words are measured but desperate. The council's hesitation and corruption contrast sharply with her unwavering commitment. This tension reflects broader themes about governance, loyalty, and the struggle between individual will and institutional inertia. Thematically, these scenes elevate the film's scope. 300 isn't just about warriors on a hill. It's about the political forces that shape destiny. It reminds audiences that battles are fought not only with spears, but with words, alliances, and betrayal. The emotional depth of these scenes resonates with viewers who appreciate that war stories are as much about what happens at home as on the battlefield. One cannot discuss 300's critical moments without mentioning the ultimate sacrifice at the film's climax. The final stand of the Spartans, outnumbered and overwhelmed, is both tragic and transcendent. The slow-motion sequences of arrows darkening the sky, the desperate pushes against wave after wave of enemies, and Leonidas's rallying cries build to a crescendo that's equal parts heartbreaking and inspiring. This scene crystallizes the film's themes of honor, legacy, and sacrifice. The Spartans fight not for personal glory, but for the survival of an idea, a concept of freedom and courage against tyranny. Critics often praise the way this climax balances spectacle with intimacy. Though the scale is vast, the camera lingers on individual faces, grimed, strained, determined, reminding the audience these are people, not just symbols. Gerard Butler's commanding presence as Leonidas embodies this perfectly. His voice, sometimes booming, sometimes tender, carries the weight of a leader who knows he's leading his men to death, but insists on making it meaningful. The audience's emotional reaction to this scene is often a mixture of awe and sorrow. The catharsis of watching heroes stand and fall together, united to the end, creates a powerful emotional release. This final moment lingers long after the credits roll, a testament to the film's storytelling craft. Equally important is the film's use of narration by Dilios, played by David Wenham. His role isn't just exposition. It's a framing device that shapes the audience's experience. Through his eyes, the battle becomes legend, myth, and inspiration. His voice, calm yet passionate, invites viewers to see the Spartan story as something greater than history, a story meant to inspire future generations. This narration adds layers of meaning and emotional depth, grounding the film's fantasy elements in human memory and storytelling tradition. Critically, Dilios's narration has been viewed as a bridge between past and present, fact and myth. It reminds the audience that 300 is as much about the stories we tell ourselves as about the events that actually happened. This meta-narrative approach invites viewers to reflect on how history is shaped by memory, bias, and legend, adding philosophical weight to the film spectacle. Another key moment deserving attention is the confrontation between Leonidas and Xerxes. Their scenes together are brief but loaded with symbolism and tension. Xerxes' calm, almost hypnotic demeanor contrasts starkly with Leonidas's fiery passion and raw defiance. The visual design of Xerxes, gleaming gold, towering height, exotic adornments, creates a godlike figure, but his soft voice and reflective moments hint at vulnerability and loneliness beneath the surface. This juxtaposition speaks to larger themes about power and identity. Xerxes offers Leonidas submission and riches, claiming divine status and inevitable victory. Leonidas rejects this, embracing human limitations and mortal courage. Their interaction is more than a clash of armies. It's a philosophical battle between tyranny and freedom, illusion and reality. Critics appreciate how the film uses these moments to explore complex ideas without sacrificing the narrative's momentum. Audiences often find these scenes chilling and hypnotic, sensing the eerie calm beneath the violence. The interplay between these two leaders shapes the emotional core of the story, making their final showdown feel like an epic confrontation of ideas as much as swords. The film's stylistic choices also merit reflection. The highly saturated reds of the Spartan cloaks, the stark blacks of the armor, and the ethereal golds of the Persian camp aren't just aesthetic, they're emotional signals. They help the audience intuitively understand the cultural divide and the stakes involved. The sharp contrast between the gritty, grounded Spartans and the almost surreal Persians reinforces the film's themes of reality versus myth, honor versus decadence. Critically, this stylization has been both praised and critiqued. Some see it as elevating the story to mythic heights, while others view it as distancing the audience from the human cost of war. However, most agree it creates a unique cinematic experience that's impossible to forget. In the quieter moments, the film's emotional layers come through as well. Scenes like Leonidas and Gorgo's brief but charged interactions remind viewers of the personal costs behind the public spectacle. Their exchanges, sparse but loaded with meaning, hint at the sacrifices demanded not just of warriors on the battlefield but of those waiting at home. These moments add humanity and depth to an otherwise action-heavy film. From the very moment 300 unfolds its hyper-stylized world, it's clear that this is more than just a retelling of a historic battle. Beneath the brutal clash of swords and the thunder of hooves lies a rich tapestry of themes, symbols, and cultural reflections that invite viewers to look deeper, beyond the blood and glory, into what the story truly means. The film, like the Spartans themselves, is a study in contrasts. Honor and brutality, freedom and tyranny, myth and reality. As the tale of King Leonidas and his warriors marches forward, these underlying layers pulse through every frame, waiting for those who want to listen. At its heart, 300 is a meditation on courage, the kind of courage that demands sacrifice not just of life but of identity and comfort. The Spartans' stand at Thermopylae isn't merely a physical battle. It's a symbolic stand for values that transcend time. Their refusal to bow to Xerxes and the Persian Empire mirrors the timeless human struggle against domination and oppression. It's a story about standing firm in your beliefs even when the world seems bent on crushing you. In this way, the Spartans become more than soldiers. They become archetypes of resistance. Their red cloaks, stained with blood, aren't just military garb. They are a visual shorthand for defiance, sacrifice, and unyielding spirit. The color red itself recurs throughout the film as a potent symbol. It's the blood spilled, yes, but also the fire of passion and the warmth of brotherhood. Red cloaks billow dramatically in the wind, painting the battlefield in a wave of color that contrasts starkly with the cold, golden light of the Persian camp. This contrast is more than artistic. It reflects a deep thematic division between two worlds. The Spartans embody earth, grit, and mortal valor, while the Persians, with their golden armor and floating throne, seem otherworldly, almost divine but unervingly artificial. Red stands for humanity and struggle, gold for power and dominance. This dichotomy hints at a larger theme in the movie, the tension between myth and reality. 300 is self-aware of its role not as a documentary, but as a legend retold through the lens of a warrior poet, Dilios. By framing the story as a narrated myth, the film asks its audience to consider how stories of heroism are constructed and passed down. What parts of history become legend? What parts are lost or distorted? This invites reflection on how societies create their heroes, often shaping the past to serve present needs. The Spartans' heroic last stand becomes less about factual accuracy and more about the spirit that inspires future generations. Delving deeper, the figure of King Leonidas himself symbolizes the ideal of leadership rooted in sacrifice and integrity. He is portrayed not just as a fearless warrior, but as a man who carries the burden of his people's hopes. His refusal to surrender reflects a profound commitment to freedom and dignity, even at the cost of his own life. His famous cry, "This is Sparta," echoes not just in battle but as a statement of identity. Proud, unyielding, and fiercely independent. Leonidas's arc mirrors a theme often explored in storytelling. The hero who must give everything to preserve a way of life, becoming immortalized not because he survives, but because he chooses to fight against impossible odds. Yet, the film doesn't shy away from the complexities and contradictions within this idealized vision. The Spartans themselves are not flawless heroes. Their society is rigid and exclusionary, with women largely confined to roles behind the scenes and a system built on intense militarism. The film touches briefly on this through Queen Gorgo's political scenes, hinting at the tension between power and gender roles. Gorgo is a figure of quiet strength and intelligence, but her influence is limited by the male-dominated council. This raises questions about the cost of such a warrior culture, not only on enemies but on its own people. In this light, 300 also explores the cost of fanaticism. The Spartans' unbreakable code drives them to heroism but also to inevitable destruction. Their refusal to retreat or compromise makes their victory a kind of tragic inevitability. This mirrors real-world reflections on how societies sometimes cling to ideals so tightly that they risk self-destruction. The film invites the audience to admire courage while pondering its limits. When does bravery become stubbornness? When does pride become fatal? On the other side of the battlefield stands Xerxes, the Persian god-king, whose portrayal is rife with symbolism. His towering golden figure, adorned with jewels and pierced ears, projects an image of divine power but also alienation. He is a god among mortals, yet deeply lonely and desperate for submission from the Spartans. Xerxes embodies themes of absolute power and its hollowness. His offer of riches and submission is less about generosity and more about erasing identity. He demands the Spartans give up their freedom and humanity to become cogs in his empire. This makes him a symbol of tyranny's seductive but ultimately dehumanizing force. Interestingly, the film layers Xerxes with contradictory traits. He is both monstrous and vulnerable. His soft, almost hypnotic voice contrasts with his overwhelming physical presence. This duality reflects the seductive nature of power. It promises safety and greatness but masks isolation and moral decay. Through Xerxes, the film comments on how tyranny is not only violent but insidious, offering false promises that erode the soul. The clash between Leonidas and Xerxes becomes more than a battle. It's a confrontation of worldviews. Mortal courage versus divine arrogance, freedom versus submission, humanity versus domination. This thematic conflict echoes throughout history and culture, which may explain the film's enduring resonance. 300 also subtly explores themes of legacy and memory. The narration by Dilios, who tells the story after surviving the battle, frames the entire film as an act of remembrance. His storytelling reminds us that history is shaped by those who survive and choose how to tell it. The Spartan sacrifice is preserved not just in their deaths, but in the story passed down. An idea of courage that transcends time and inspires future generations. This touches on a universal human desire to be remembered for standing for something meaningful. Symbolism also weaves through smaller elements in the film, enriching the narrative texture. The wolf that appears early on, for example, isn't just a random animal. It symbolizes the wild, untamed spirit of Sparta. Its presence foreshadows the fierce independence and relentless strength of the Spartans, who, like wolves, operate as a pack with loyalty and deadly precision. Similarly, the narrow mountain pass becomes a symbol of resistance. It's a natural choke point that amplifies the Spartan strategy of fighting with limited resources against overwhelming numbers. The geography itself becomes part of the story, representing how smaller forces can hold off empires through ingenuity and will. The film's use of light and shadow further enhances these symbolic contrasts. The Spartan warriors are often lit with sharp, harsh light, emphasizing their muscle and determination, while the Persian camp glows with a soft, otherworldly radiance, underscoring its unnatural and threatening nature. This visual storytelling reinforces the moral and thematic distinctions between the two sides without needing words. Looking beyond the film's internal symbolism, 300 also reflects broader societal and cultural themes relevant to its release time. Premiering in 2006, during a period marked by global conflicts and debates about freedom, security, and identity, the film's story of a small group standing against a massive invading force resonated deeply. Many viewers and commentators interpreted the film as an allegory for contemporary struggles, whether geopolitical or cultural. The idea of fighting for freedom against overwhelming odds tapped into a zeitgeist shaped by the post-9/11 world, the war on terror, and questions about national identity and values. The Spartans' defiance became a symbol of resistance not only in a historical sense but as a metaphor for standing up against perceived threats to liberty and sovereignty. This added layers of meaning for audiences who saw echoes of their own world in the ancient story. At the same time, the film sparked debates about nationalism and representation. Some critics argued that the stark division between heroic Spartans and monstrous Persians simplified complex histories into a binary good versus evil narrative. Others noted the film's stylized violence and masculine bravado and discussed how it reflects cultural ideals of heroism and masculinity. These conversations highlight how 300 is not just entertainment, but a cultural artifact that prompts reflection on how stories shape and reflect societal values. The film's portrayal of gender, too, offers subtle commentary. Queen Gorgo's role, while limited, stands out as a rare depiction of female strength in a heavily masculine environment. Her calm intelligence and moral clarity challenge the male council, offering a glimpse of another kind of power, one based on wisdom and resilience rather than force. This contrast invites viewers to consider the roles women play in history and myth, often behind the scenes but no less vital. Ultimately, 300 invites audiences into a world where myth and history courage and sacrifice, freedom and tyranny collide in vivid color. Its themes are timeless because they tap into fundamental human experiences: the need to stand for something, the costs of loyalty, and the power of stories to shape identity. The film's symbolism enriches its narrative, giving viewers visual and emotional touchstones to hold onto amidst the spectacle. From the very first moments of 300, it's clear that this isn't a typical historical war film. It's a bold visual statement, a vivid, painterly world where every frame feels carefully crafted to evoke myth and legend. Director Zack Snyder's vision is unapologetically stylized, and the film's cinematic techniques play a massive role in shaping its unforgettable atmosphere. The way the camera moves, the color choices, the editing rhythm, the soundscape, all combine to create an immersive experience that feels both ancient and utterly modern. The visual style of 300 is one of its most striking features. The film adopts a high-contrast, almost graphic novel-like look that faithfully echoes Frank Miller's original comic, from which it draws direct inspiration. Every shot feels meticulously composed, as if the camera itself is an artist's brush painting scenes of heroic grandeur. The lighting is dramatic, often casting deep shadows that sculpt the Spartan warrior's muscles and armor into statuesque forms. This chiaroscuro effect lends the characters a timeless, almost mythic quality. Heroes caught between light and darkness, human and divine. Cinematographer Larry Fong's work deserves special mention here. His choice of ultra-saturated reds for the Spartans' cloaks and the stark, desaturated backgrounds creates a striking visual contrast that immediately signals the Spartans' fiery spirit amidst a bleak, oppressive environment. The muted browns and grays of the Rocky Mountain Pass and the cold blue hues of the Persian army further emphasize this contrast, visually isolating the Spartans as a fiery flame standing against an overwhelming, cold tide. The film's camera work plays with both grandiosity and intimacy. Wide shots capture the scale of the battlefield, showing the tiny band of Spartans dwarfed by the sprawling Persian hordes. These sweeping views highlight the enormity of their challenge, emphasizing the mythic David versus Goliath narrative. Yet the camera also zooms in sharply, lingering on close-ups of faces, beads of sweat, blood streaks, eyes burning with resolve. This duality keeps the audience emotionally connected to the warriors while never losing sight of the epic scale. One of the most distinctive cinematic techniques in 300 is its extensive use of slow-motion sequences. These moments stretch out time, allowing the audience to savor every strike, every dodge, every movement with almost balletic precision. The slow motion isn't just for spectacle. It transforms violence into a form of art, where the physicality of combat becomes poetry. The arcs of spears, the ripple of muscles, the spray of blood all take on symbolic weight. These moments invite viewers to appreciate not just the brutality but the grace and discipline of Spartan warfare. Editing plays a crucial role in shaping the film's relentless pace. The cuts are sharp and purposeful, alternating between rapid-fire action and slower, tension-building moments. This rhythm mirrors the ebb and flow of battle, the chaos and the calm, the surge and the regroup. The quick cuts during combat heighten the adrenaline rush, making the viewer feel as if they're in the thick of the fight. Meanwhile, longer takes in the political scenes or the quiet moments between characters give space for reflection and emotional depth. What sets 300 apart visually is its heavy reliance on green screen and digital compositing, which allows the filmmakers to create a hyper-realistic, almost painterly world. The backgrounds, landscapes, and even some characters are digitally crafted to look like living illustrations. This approach breaks from traditional realism and transports the viewer into a stylized mythscape where the rules of physics and proportion bend to narrative needs. The sky often glows with unnatural hues, deep purples, fiery oranges, underscoring the story's epic and otherworldly tone. Sound design and music further amplify this cinematic experience. Tyler Bates' powerful score blends orchestral grandeur with primal percussion, creating a soundtrack that feels both ancient and urgent. The pounding drums mimic the heartbeat of the Spartans, driving forward the tension and excitement. The music swells during battle scenes, enhancing the emotional highs and lows, then falls away in quieter moments to let the characters' voices and the natural sounds carry the weight. Sound effects in 300 are deliberately amplified and stylized. The clang of swords, the thud of spears, the whiz of arrows, each is given a sharp clarity that cuts through the mix, pulling the audience into the visceral reality of combat. The crunch of footsteps on rocky terrain, the crackle of fire, the distant war cries, all layer to build a rich oral tapestry that grounds the film's mythic visuals in sensory reality. Dialogue delivery and vocal performances are shaped by the sound design as well. Gerard Butler's Leonidas speaks with a powerful, commanding voice, often echoing slightly to give a heroic, larger-than-life feel. The Persian voices, particularly Xerxes's calm and measured tones, are processed to sound almost ethereal, reinforcing their alien and godlike status. This sonic differentiation helps the audience immediately sense the cultural and thematic divide between the two forces. The film's use of silence is equally noteworthy. In moments before battle or when tension peaks, the music cuts out, and sound fades to near nothing. These pauses create suspense and focus the audience's attention on subtle sounds, breathing, footsteps, a drawn bowstring, heightening emotional engagement. This strategic use of quiet contrasts sharply with the overwhelming noise of combat, making the action scenes feel all the more intense when they explode back to life. Stylistic choices extend beyond visuals and sound to costume and makeup, which are integral to storytelling. The Spartans' minimalist armor, exposing powerful physiques and scars, visually communicates their discipline, toughness, and pride. Their red cloaks fluttering in the wind add dynamic movement and symbolize their warrior spirit. In contrast, the Persian forces wear ornate, gilded costumes and elaborate headdresses, underscoring their wealth, excess, and otherness. This costume design visually reinforces the narrative's theme of humble valor versus opulent tyranny. Makeup and prosthetics also contribute to the film's larger-than-life aesthetic. Xerxes's heavily adorned and altered appearance blurs the line between human and deity, creating a mesmerizing and unsettling effect. The blood spatter and dirt on the Spartans, meanwhile, remind viewers of the physical toll of battle and the gritty reality beneath the myth. Another bold visual storytelling choice is the way the film handles the portrayal of violence. While graphic, the violence is stylized, presented almost as choreography, turning each clash into a visual dance of strength and precision. The blood is richly colored, often slow-motion sprays of crimson that paint the frame dramatically. This approach balances the horror of war with a mythic beauty, elevating the Spartans' struggle into legend. It also avoids gratuitous gore by focusing on the form and flow of combat rather than explicit brutality. The framing and composition frequently use symmetry and repetition, which add a ritualistic feel to battles. The Spartans move in tight formations, their shields interlocking in perfect patterns that recall ancient battle tacticos. Director Zack Snyder's signature visual flourishes, such as lens flares, slow zooms, and stylized camera angles, permeate the film. These techniques enhance the dreamlike, mythic atmosphere. For instance, the slow zoom on Leonidas as he surveys the battlefield or declares defiance invites the audience into his mindset, making us feel his determination and gravitas intimately. Snyder's choice to lean heavily on digital effects rather than practical sets and locations was initially controversial but ultimately pivotal in creating the film's unique look. This method allowed the creation of surreal landscapes, jagged cliffs, endless deserts, fantastical Persian palaces that would be impossible or prohibitively expensive in traditional filming. The digital environment becomes a character in its own right, shaping mood and narrative. The editing rhythm deserves further exploration because it's instrumental in sustaining 300's energy. The battle scenes cut between wide panoramic shots and tight close-ups, keeping viewers oriented in space while maintaining emotional intensity. Moments of rapid montage are punctuated by lingering shots, allowing the audience to absorb the consequences of each strike. This creates a push and pull that mimics the chaos of real combat while giving narrative beats room to breathe. The pacing is also deliberate in the film's quieter moments. Political intrigue scenes slow the pace, employing longer takes and subdued lighting to contrast with the explosive battle sequences. This gives the audience time to digest the stakes and appreciate the human cost behind the violence. The contrast between these sequences heightens the impact of the battles when they return. Sound mixing plays a subtle but crucial role in shaping the film's immersive quality. The layering of sound, ambient noise, dialogue, music, effects, is carefully balanced to maintain clarity while creating a rich soundscape. This ensures that even in the thick of battle, viewers can hear the distinct voices of characters, preserving emotional connection amid chaos. The film's voiceover narration also integrates seamlessly with the sound design and visuals. David Wenham's calm yet passionate delivery guides viewers through the story, adding context and framing the events as legend. The narration's tone shifts fluidly, sometimes reflective, sometimes urgent, complementing the visuals and music to deepen the emotional resonance. Lastly, the film's choice to embrace an almost graphic novel aesthetic extends beyond visual cues to pacing and tone. It treats the story like a myth being lived, blending historical facts with heightened fiction, larger-than-life characters, and dramatic dialogue. This approach invites audiences to suspend disbelief and engage with the film on the level of legend and archetype rather than documentary realism. In sum, 300's cinematic techniques and visual storytelling form a tightly woven whole that elevates the film beyond mere retelling. Every choice, from lighting and color to camera movement, editing, sound, and digital effects, works in harmony to immerse the audience in a world that feels simultaneously ancient and mythic. The film's style becomes part of its substance, reinforcing themes of courage, sacrifice, and defiance through every frame and note. Watching 300 is less like watching history and more like stepping into a living painting, where sound and image pulse with emotion and meaning. It's a bold, unforgettable cinematic experience that proves how visual storytelling can transform a familiar tale into a timeless legend.